another quick tie. Your next fly starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another quick tie. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. And as you can see up there on the screen, we've got an awesome pattern for you tonight. We have the Marabou Clouser, a bit of a modern twist on an old classic. And in my opinion, I might like it a little bit more. I'll leave that up to you and you can decide. But it's a great pattern, super easy to tie, and definitely one you can have in a lot of different colors and sizes in your box at all times, kind of no matter where you're fishing or what you're fishing for. I'm going to be tying out of my Season 7 kit today, so I have this guy here. If you're tying out of the same, go ahead and grab the Episode 10 kit out of there, and you're going to have 2 flies in there. This is going to be one of them. If you're tying out of our individual kits, you also can just go right from the package. It's going to be the same materials, and if you don't have any of our kits, that's fine as well. Especially this one, super simple. Head over to our website. You can see the fly recipe there. Grab some materials, and you can get this one knocked out as well. We do want to take a second and thank Western Canada Fly Fishing Guide School for sponsoring this quick tie for you guys tonight. The class is full for this year, but we might, if we had enough interest, open another one. So if you have any questions about it or curiosity or interested in next year, go over to our website and or just reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions you might have about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think of this pattern. Hit that little bell icon. It'll notify you every time we have a new video coming your way. All right, well, without further ado, let's get on over to the vise and check out this pattern. So as you can tell, it looks a lot like a normal Clouser, but instead of tying it with bucktail, we are tying it with Marabou. Now, some of the reasons I think this has a little bit of an advantage is there is a lot more movement that comes out of Marabou than bucktail, as bucktail is a very stiff material. This downside to this one is that it does hold a lot more water, and it's not as easy to shed it off when you're casting, so it's going to feel maybe a little heavier than bucktail would. But overall, I think the movement and everything on this fly is pretty deadly. And it's such a simple tie that you're going to want to have a lot of these in your box just because it's easy to tie them, quick to tie them, and there's so many varieties that you can do with it. So let's just go ahead, get this one out of the vise, and we'll take you through this pattern. So we're tying a little bit of a kind of a smaller trout size version of this today. So we're tying this on a size 10 hook, long shank hook. You obviously could tie this all the way up into bigger saltwater sizes, or appropriate for wherever you are and what you like to fish. But this one is going to be catered a little bit more to the size of trout. Now I'm going to be tying with some UTC 140 in olive to somewhat match the pattern today. Black or white would also be totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and start my thread just back behind the eye a little ways above that downturned eye. And once I got a little thread base down, I'm just going to trim that out. Now, the thing I do like to do before I put my dumbbell eyes on especially a smaller hook, is it has a tendency of wanting to slide around a little bit, is I'm going to put a little dab of some Zap-A-Gap, and that's going to really help get those eyes to lock in. Now, when I'm thinking about where I want to tie that eye in, I'm going to think, you know, maybe not a third of the way back down the hook, but a quarter of the way for sure. We want to leave some space to properly get a good cone shape on the front when we tie in with our thread, and we got all those materials in there. This material, Marabou, is a little bit more difficult to trim cleanly, more than bucktail, let's say. So I would err on the caution of giving yourself a little bit too much space at the front of the hook shank itself. So I'm going to come in here, and I do just want it to be a very small dab, so I'm going to work a lot off that brush and then just put a dab right on there. Now, this fly is going to be tied in an orientation where the dumbbell eyes are going to stay on top of the hook, which means the hook point itself is going to ride up in the water stream, and that also is going to help with snagging up on bottom and things like that, because simply it's just not going to be there. It's going to be pointed up. So we're going to leave the weight up on top of the hook shank. So I've done just a simple cross wrap to get that to start to secure, and now you're just going to want to do a whole series of X wraps, just like it sounds like, making an X back and forth over top of those dumbbell eyes. That super glue is really going to help bind it, but we want to re-secure that with the thread. And we do want them to look pretty perpendicular to that hook. And then once I get here, I'm going to do some full figure eights as well. And then I'm also going to do some thread wraps just around the eyes themselves on top of the hook shank. All these things help those eyes from moving around. Maybe you've caught a few fish that super glue might have broke loose and now the eyes want to move a bit, but if we've got wraps in all those directions and simply around the eyes themselves, it's going to should force them into position and not come out too easy. So once I got those secure, I am just going to run a quick thread base all the way down the hook shank. Even though we're not going to use the hook shank back there, I just like to add that little bit of thread into the back also covers up that kind of goldy shiny hook, and really is just gonna match the color of the pattern that we're using. So the first thing we're gonna do on this one is we're gonna add in what's actually gonna be, excuse me, gonna be the bottom side of the fly. So we're gonna kind of classically in these patterns, you would go a lighter color on the bottom and a darker color on top, just to signify, you know, like a baitfish pattern, we would maybe go black on top, white on bottom. This one's gonna be white on bottom and olive on top. So I'm gonna grab my first piece of marabou, like so. I'm gonna add a little moisture with my fingers, a little saliva. I wanna get this pretty thin down and pointed so that I can gauge the length that I want this to be. And I want this tail to hang off this hook shank roughly 2 full hook shanks in length. So I'm just gonna do a quick measurement. That'd be 1, 2, and that's where I'm gonna set my tie-in point. So I'm gonna tie it in where my second hook shank length was. So 1, 2, I'm gonna leave my fingers there. This is where I'm gonna tie it in. Now this varies a little bit from the original Clouser where we would be tying this in at the back. We're gonna tie this in just behind the eyes. So I'm gonna switch my hands over. I'm gonna lay that down and I'm gonna get my first thread wrap right there. And I'm pinching it to keep it up on top of the hook shank so that it can't go around the hook shank itself. And I'm just gonna take a series of wraps there just to make sure that's really good and secure. And now from here, I'm gonna bring my thread in front of those dumbbell eyes. I'm gonna lay all this marabou down right in that crease built by the eyes themselves. And I'm gonna take a thread wrap in front of them. I'm gonna pull that down nice and tight, really locking in that material right behind the eyes. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna try to actually trim that pretty close to my tying point because I'm gonna create a taper with the thread going down from there. So I'm gonna come in and try to trim this off at an angle up towards those eyes. So you can see it's got a bit of a taper to it already. So when I come to bring my thread down here, I should be able to create a pretty nice little ramp with my thread. I'm not gonna go crazy on it yet because I do have other materials to tie in still on the other side. So from here, I'm gonna then just take this and flip it upside down to tie in my next material. And before I do that next piece of marabou, I'm gonna grab myself a nice long piece of crystal flash out of your kit. That's a full length piece. I'm gonna fold it in half, match up a couple of the tips, and I'm gonna come and trim out the loop on the bottom. So I've effectively cut that big long piece in half. And then from there, I'm just gonna set one of those aside, and I'm gonna grab one of them, and I'm gonna fold it in half again. I'm gonna utilize this length again. So I'm gonna cut that in half again. So I folded it in half. I'm gonna come down, trim the loop. Now from here, I wanna keep those tips pretty much aligned this is where I'm gonna tie them in. I'm gonna find the midway point in between, and I'm gonna tie this in right behind the eye. So I'm gonna transfer my thread back behind the eye, and I'm gonna lay this down right here. And I'm gonna tie it in right on top of the hook shank. This is gonna be sandwiched in between the materials. And I make a thread wrap there to secure that side. And then I'm gonna grab the 2 that are still left out front, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna get them latched down with some thread wraps. And now what we'd like this to do is have half of them on one side of the hook itself and half on the other. So I've got those split, and we'll trim the overall length of those at the end of the pattern. But there we go, we got those tied in. This guy's being stubborn and sticking up, but he is on that side of the hook. Now I'm gonna transfer my thread back to in front of the eyes. I'm gonna get just a little bit of this extra marabou off the front here before I tie in my green stuff. And now I've done the same thing. I've added some moisture to this, this green marabou piece. I'm gonna come in here, and this guy's gonna get tied in only in front of the eyes. So I wanna, again, this time I don't really have to do my measurement. I can just lay it on top and match it so that it matches the white. And then I'm gonna lay this right down at my tie-in point and tie this in just behind the eyes. Again, pinching it so that it stays right on top of the hook shank, which would technically now be the bottom of the hook shank. Before I do anything else, I'm gonna try to part that marabou with my fingers and draw it equally to each side of that hook. So it looks like that. You can see it's fully encompassed that hook. I've got half on one side, half on the other. And now same thing here. I'm gonna take a couple more thread wraps, and then I'm gonna trim this out. It's a little tougher because that eye now, that downturned eye is faced up. I need to try to sneak in my scissors as close as I can and trim that off. It's a little trickier with the shape of that eye. So now, keeping all those materials out of the way, I wanna really lock down these materials. So I'm gonna try to start creating a bit of a ramp with my thread, a bit of a bulkier head with this, that cone shape, and it should form itself pretty quickly just like that. If you got any little pieces that are hanging out, you can either trim them or try to get some more thread wraps on top of them. And I have one more thing I'm gonna do, and that's gonna go back and grab the other half of that piece of crystal flash. We're gonna fold that in half one more time and trim it. So we're gonna be left again with two pieces. I'm gonna find the midway point, and we're gonna add in one more set of flash here, and this is gonna be right at the front of the fly. And this is gonna sit technically what would be the top side of the pattern. I'm gonna lay them down right where I tied in that marabou. And I'm gonna spin my thread so it hops rearward for me. Gonna tie those in here behind the eye on one side, and then bring the other ones over and do the same. And the goal is, again, to get two of them on one side of the hook and two on the other, just like that. I can pull all that material rearward, and now I'm just gonna finish off with one more coating here of thread to the eye. And then I'll come in here and whip finish it. And then we're gonna add a little bit of resin at the end to complete this off and make sure none of these thread wraps come out. And this is a very durable pattern. You should be able to catch multiple fish with this without it falling apart on you. I'm gonna pull that whip finish tight. Just do a 2 to 4 turn whip finish. Once you got that out, I'm gonna come over here and grab some of my UV Solar Bone Dry. I really like this. It gives us a nice hard cured head. And I'm just gonna basically coat all the thread wraps, top and bottom, and let that soak in. This is a really thin UV, so it likes to soak in really well. Just let that take a second to soak into the wraps, and then I'll come in here and I'll cure it. And then all we gotta do is trim our flash to length, and we should be just about done this pattern. Here we go. Now I'll come back and I'm gonna orient it back the way we originally tied everything in, even though technically the fly is upside down right now. I'm gonna pull all that flash together out to the back of the fly, and I'm just basically gonna trim it right at the back of that piece of marabou. Trim those off square. If you like, add a little bit of moisture to it again. You're gonna get a little better representation of the profile in the water and making sure all that flash is where it needs to be. And there you have it, guys. That is the Marabou Clouser. Like I said, not a super difficult pattern, but it really comes together well, and I think it's gonna do well for you. Definitely try some color variations of this. This is my favorite though, the olive and white. And never hold back on the crystal flash. I don't think there's a downside to having a little bit more flash in your streamer. And I like to put a little bit extra in mine as well. Okay, again, my name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. I want to thank you for joining us for this quick tie. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Hit that little bell icon, and it'll notify you next week when we have another pattern coming your way. Until then, have a great week, and we'll see you then.